Kumlan Abat Gemara. This is the Gemara for Shabbos. Daf Chof Vav Amar Aleph. So the Gemara, Amar. You just said halacha by Nazir. Rabbi Yechon said there's a special halacha by Nazir when the woman's consecrated the money to bring karbanis, and then she's no longer a Nazir, so she doesn't have to bring the karbanis, but the money is holy. What do you do with that money? So we said if the money has not been nominated, you use the entire money to buy an oila, and then we said, but isn't there chatas money included in there? So we said the special halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and it sounds like this is the only place where you have halacha l'Moshe Sinai, that the money stays, that the fact that the money of chatas is pulled together doesn't disturb us. You don't bring it as a chatas. Let me ask you a question. The Amaman halachi ben the special halacha by Nazir Suleka, you don't find the precedent for it anywhere else. But Tanya didn't we learn the Shar Chayavik Kain Shabbatayda. There are certain karbanas that people bring. For example, someone who's a leper or a woman who gave birth. They have to bring a twin set of birds, and it's called a kain. They bring two birds as their karbanas. Chatas and oil, and this is called the carbon oil of the yoder. These two, that means that depending how wealthy you are, you bring animals, and if you're wealthy, you bring animals. If you're not so wealthy, you bring birds. So what happens over there? She set aside these two pigeons. She frishu mois the you set aside money. This is the pigeon itself. You set aside money, and then suddenly you became wealthy. So now that you're a wealthy person, let's say you're a mitzvah, a leper, you can bring now an animal. You can just add money to the money you set aside and now purchase an animal instead of the birds. If he wants to add money and use the money that he originally started with for chatas, he can. For an oil, he can. What happens, mace? You can add more money, and so therefore, let's say only put aside a few dollars, and now we can have a lot more money, so you can use some of the money for chatas and some for oil. What happens if he died? So now that he died, you no longer have to bring a chatas. And he set aside money for these two pigeons, but now that he's dead, doesn't need the kabbanis anymore. You take the entire lot of money and you buy voluntary kabbanis. But there's chatas money included in that pile. So we see there's another case, halacha l'Moshe Sinai, that even though there's chatas money included, because he didn't nominate it, you can take the entire lot of money and buy voluntary kabbanis. So what do you make a big deal out of Nazir when you have the same thing by other cases? Well, so you're right. Tana Nazir, learn Nazir, v'chayav v'kainin the domila. Learn Nazir and also the case of the two pigeons, which are very similar. These are two exceptions. And why is it very similar? So the Rashi actually says an interesting thing. A Nazir who is tamei also brings a Nazir who is tamei brings animals, but a Nazir who is tamei brings two birds, a chatas and an oila. So it's very similar. And therefore, even since by a Nazir tamei it's very similar, so even a Nazir Torah and kinyan are very similar. Ulafuke, and this comes to negate it comes to negate the following case. So why do we only mention Nazir when in fact it includes also the other case of the pigeons? It comes to not to exclude that case, but it comes to exclude the following case. That if there's chatas money involved, you cannot use it to buy voluntary oilers. The time we learn Misha in the following case. Somebody, let's say, was obligated to bring a carbon chatas, but then Rami said, you know what, I'm ready to go to the base of Mikdash. I'm going to bring a donation as well. I'll also bring an animal offering, an oiler. The hifrish mice, and he set aside money. But he said, he said, this money should be to fulfill my obligations. In other words, to cover my chatas, which is an obligation, but also to cover my oil because I took it upon myself. If he wants to bring a chatas behema with his money, he can't. He cannot bring a chatas because included in that money is also oil. Oil, baby, he wants to buy an oil with this money, he can't. Because in this money is a chatas. What happened? Macy died, and you have this money that you didn't nominate, exactly what's going on. You didn't say what. You throw it away. Now, why should that be different? Here's exactly the same thing. You didn't nominate the money, and because there's chatas money involved, you have to throw it away. What's the difference? So he says the difference is as follows. In the case by Nazir, both karbanas, the chatas and oila, are born out of the same mitzvah of Nazir, and therefore we say that a special halacha Moshe Sinai, if the money has been divided, that you can use entire money for voluntary carbon. But in this case over here, it's two different obligations. The chatas is obligations for one thing. You have to bring a chatas to commit a sin by inadvertently, and the oila that you separately decided to take upon yourself an oila sadaka. So it's a separate mitzvah, and therefore they don't combine together at all. If you have one set of money for both, then the chatas prevents the oil from money from being used to buy an oil. You have to throw both away. What's the definition of stam that you didn't specify? What's exactly the definition? And the Mishnah makes a contrast, whether it's Russian, you spelled it out, or whether it's sort of you didn't spell it out. What's the difference? This that we say, Russian law, that if you spelled it out, you said, that this money should be a chatas and shlamim, that we say that no, that entire you cannot use the money for an oil like Tamer. Don't think the Omar he spelled it out. Elu lechatasi, this exactly this amount is for my chatas. Elu losi, this my oil. Elu shlamim. Elafila Omar elu lechatasi lo'elu shlamim. Without spelling out exactly, he just said that this money, you take a whole sum of money. Don't think it means three piles: one pile of chatas, one pile of oil, one pile of ocean, and then we say that the chatas money does not, get lost, dissolved, mixed in with the rest. No, even if you have only one pile of money, but you said that in this pile there's a chatas and oil and shlamim, that's called Russian. You spelled it out, and you cannot use the money to buy voluntary kavanos. That's called Russian. And what's called anonymous, what's called that stam. Stam is if he didn't say that this is chatas oil shlamim, he just said this is for my obligation. That's called stam. That's one version. I'll go a step further. Don't think Ado Omar has to say these words. That this money is for my chatas, my oil shlamim. He nominated, even though it's one pile of money. Even if he says this is for my chayva, this is to meet my obligations. That's for Russian, because obligations include chatas and shlamim, and therefore the chatas money does not allow you to buy voluntary. You know what voluntary? You know what stam is? Stam is you said this is for my naziris. So you didn't highlight at all any kabbalah. You just said this is my naziris. Then we say that the halacha says the chatas money gets dissolved over there, and you can buy, and you can use that money to buy the extra money to buy your oilers, your voluntary oilers. Amar versus Rabbi. This is what we say. That you didn't nominate the money. You buy these voluntary kavanas. Let's say the amount of the chatas is $50, and suddenly out of this pile, $50 fell to the side. What do you have left now? Only the oil and shlamim. And when it comes to an oil and shlamim, then it's considered like it is that it's spelled out, and therefore that money there you cannot use for oil and adova. Now that you have left over in that pile only oil and shlamim, then you'll have to use part of the money to buy an oil and part of the money to buy a shlamim. Like we said before, without bread, you have to eat it for one day, one night. It's no longer just buy voluntary kavanos. The moment you pull the chatas away, the chatas fall out, the balance of the money. In other words, this is halacha mishmasinai. And you take that entire lot of money and you buy voluntary kavanos. Only if the chatas money is included in there. The moment the chatas money has been taken out, then the balance of the money you can only use for what you set aside in the first place. Part oil, part shlamim. Second one, big chiddush. That's only the chatas money. Tani kavasi the Rabbi actually live like Rabbi. It says elu lechatasi. The following money is for my chatas. V'ashar l'shan is raisa, and the rest of the money is for my rest of my obligations. So then the mei chatas yelchu yam hamelech. The money of the chatas goes to yam hamelech. And v'ashar you have the chetz. Since you have separate the chatas from the rest, so the chatas money you toss away, and the rest you have to treat it like your obligations, half for oil and half for shlamim. But since the rest is one pile mixed between oil and shlamim, and by oil, as in if you use the money for your own benefit, you're stealing from the base of Midrash. So if you use the entire lot of money, then definitely part of it was the oil money, so you consider the ganef. But the aim if you only use part of the money, by a carbon shlamim, you're not stealing because it's kachim kalim until you sprinkle the blood. So therefore, if you only use part of the money, you're not a moil, you're not stealing, because how do we know which money you used? Did you use the oil money or the shlamim money? But however, if he says this pile of money here's for my oil, this other pile covers this shan is which is the chatas and the shlamim, then the may oil, you have the oil, the money of the oil used for the oil. Behind you treat like an ordinary oil, you're stealing if you use it for your own benefit. But the rest, if you don't need anymore, let's say the woman is the nazir, and the husband knows that she's no longer nazir, then the rest of the money, because there's the chatas mixed in there, what do you do with that money? You go ahead and you buy voluntary kabbalah. So this supports a Rava that says that this halacha only applies to a chatas money. Umayelin bekulin, saying before, when are you moil? If you have a chattas and you have shlomim mixed together, if you use the entire lot of money, the chattas you're stealing, so then definitely you use some of the money of the chattas. And you don't have to be really the entire lot, as Rishonim say, even if you use more than half, then we know you use some of the money from the chattas, and therefore you're stealing. But the ein moil miktas, if you only use part of the money, half or less, then could be that you use the shlom money and you're not stealing. This only applies if you set money aside. If you set aside a behema, let's say you set aside 3 animals, when it comes to animals, even though you didn't spell it out, it's as if you already spelled out. Why? Rashi explains, because when it comes to a chattas, it's a female. So if you have a female animal, then we know automatically it's a chattas. When it comes to an earl, it's a male. So if there's a male animal, then we know it's a chattas. And if you have a ram there that's 2 years old, then automatically we know that's a shlomim. So therefore, harehein kimu for Rashi. Taisa says it can't be that shot because that's so obvious. Taisa says if you have 3 cows there, animals, none of the animals you can use for Nazir. But because you have 3 different animals, therefore it's obvious that each animal you're going to sell and the money of that animal you're going to use for a different carbon. So then the Gemara continues. Loishana, when do we say that if you have animals, it's considered as if you specified, and therefore if the person no longer needs these carbonas cannot be used for just to sell it and to buy voluntary oilers if they are whole animals unblemished. So therefore it's like suitable for a carbon. If they already contracted a mum, which means you couldn't have used these animals for carbon anyway, you were going to turn it into money, convert it into money. So even though in front of us are standing these 3 animals, we don't see animals, what we see is money. And the same thing, therefore it hasn't been nominated, and the money can be used to buy voluntary carbonas. When it comes to silver, if you have 3 pieces of silver, then if you have 3 pieces of silver sitting there, it looks to us like each silver represents another carbon of a carbon. It's as if it's mefurish, and if you don't need it anymore, you cannot. One of them has to be tossed away, and so on. You cannot use it to buy voluntary carbonas. But Nachman Yishcha disagrees. He said, I feel Nascha, even 3 pieces of silver, to us, silver represents money. We don't look at it as each one's a carbon, we look at each one as just money, and therefore, since you denominate it, it's as if it's one pile, and therefore it's you can use it to buy voluntary carbonas if you don't no longer need that money for your carbonas. If you have a pile of beams, if you have 3 piles of beams, then like 3 piles of beams is so remote, it's so far from money, then it's as if it's mefurish, that one is a chattas, that one you have to toss away. What's the logic here of these rabbis, of these Amorai, what they're saying here? That they're saying that only money and not chunks of silver or not the piles of beams. What's the logic in that? They say only money. Do we say halacha, but not if you have 3 animals? Not piece of silver, money, but not piles of beams. And the Vinovas, they hold that the halach mashina was specifically only money, and not other things like piles of silver. The piles of silver is not considered money that we make this thing there that the chattas is piled together, and therefore it's as if you have one group, one of them represents chattas, and whichever one represents the chattas, you have to throw that away into the Yam HaMelech. Says the Gemara Me'ativ. So why do you also say? In fact,